gone. Going live now. Okay. Ah, brilliant. Okay, so we've got the questions are up, and let's hope it'll just let people know that we're here, ready to go. Oh, look at Fern. Okay, so something has definitely happened in Facebook, so this is good. There's a little bit of a delay on it, but yeah, well, it looks like we are cooking on gas. That's great. So we'll just hang around and wait for a few people to join us. This technology has all worked. Yep, we've got some people tuning in. If you'd like to just let us know where you're from, that would be fantastic. If we've got any Dale's Pony people in the house, that would be great too. Come here to meet Fern. We'll just give a couple of, I think we're just a couple of minutes ahead of schedule. So we just wanted to get everything up and running for our first live. So thank you everyone for joining us. If you just let us know that you can hear okay and that everything's working in the comments, that would be brilliant. Very nice. Okay. So have you had a good bank holiday, Kristy?
Yes, we've had lots of fun. We've been out riding for the longest we've ever been out riding.
Wow. Yeah, so Fern's just 5, is that right now?
Yep, she's rising 5.
Wow.
Time flies.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so we've just had our first comment. Yeah, people are tuning in. Looks like we're all good, which is fantastic. So if you're watching us live, hello and welcome to the first of our lives, Tales Behind the Tests. We've decided to put this on because we talk so much about the actual sort of science behind it, and then we never really look at the real life sort of case studies of it. So what we thought we'd do is we would go and beam ourselves into some case studies to have a look at those and meet the horses that are actually kind of going through these issues with their worming and the parasite control programs. So to kick us off and to keep it close to home, we thought we would talk with my very good friend and colleague, Kristy. Oh, hi, Laura. She's just tuning in. Laura's going to be on with us next week, introducing us to Mikey, which is fab. Hi there, Chris. Hi, Kat. Great to see you. So yeah, we are going to be talking to Kristy, and she's going to be introducing us to this beautiful pony behind us, which is her pony Fern, Dale's pony, and telling us a little bit more about Fern and the problems that she's had with her parasite control that we've had to help her overcome. So Kristy, how old is Fern now? We're talking about that. She's
rising 5. So
yeah.
I've had for just over 4 years now. She was 10 months when she came to me, so freshly weaned. So yeah, we've gone through quite a bit together already in that 4 years.
And she's not your first Dale's pony, is she?
No, she's not. I think she's the 4th or 5th, but she's the first mare I've had, and they're definitely a different kettle of fish, shall we say.
And Kristy, so you're in your day job, you're our ops director and a qualified Wermer here at Westgate. I think everyone who's tuning in and who has had something to do with Westgate will know Kristy and have benefited from her experience. So getting a young horse, what did you expect?
So I expected her to have worms because young horses do. So generally until they're around about 4, their immune system isn't fully developed. Therefore, they're more prone to picking up worms. So it's more likely that they will have burden or that it will be higher than most healthy adult horses. So I expected her to come with worms and to have to, worm her a few times in those first few years. But what we found was that she had a burden and it was hard to get rid of. So yeah, that was a tricky one.
So yeah, not quite as straightforward as you expected, really.
No, I thought I'd worm her once or twice and that would be sort of it for a little while. Because of what we do, we tested her literally as soon as she came out of the trailer. That was the first thing that we did so that we could see exactly what she was coming to us with. And then we could start a proactive and a targeted approach to what we needed to treat and how we needed to treat that.
So we've got some slides here, haven't we, which show just the her actual history and what we did with her in 2018 when she arrived with you. So I'll just see if I can pop these into the video there so we can see. There she is, Fern as a yearling when she arrived. And 2018 seems a long time ago now. And then this is where you started from, isn't it?
That's right. So as soon as she came, that first test was 1,000 eggs per gram, which is the higher end of medium. So not too bad, pretty much what I expected. Because she was so young and young horses don't have a huge amount of body fat, even though she is a Dales pony. We did the 5-day guard first. So the fenbendazole was the first drug that we used. And the reason that I chose that one was we weren't totally sure on her worming history. We thought she may have had a Wermer, but we weren't certain. It's a gentle Wermer that you give over the course of 5 days. And it was also going to target roundworms, so the ascarids, which can be common in youngsters as well. So we did that one. She's pretty greedy, so she ate that no problem at all in feed. And then, as you can see, we tested a little bit later just to ensure that that had done the job. So that had responded well to that worming, and the result was only 50 EPG. We decided to then just monitor that and see how that progressed as to how quickly she was going to become reinfected and how quickly that count was going to go back up. So you can see by early June, she was up to the magic 200 EPG that we would dose at. So we then chose to give an ivermectin Wermer next, just to target those adult stages of redworm. So we gave that to her. Again, we monitored her closely. The result isn't on there, but we did do a reduction test to check that that was effective, and that had cleared the burden again. But as you can see, even though she was on poo-picked pasture with just one horse, that count was just steadily getting higher again. So once we got to July, it was back up to 700 EPG. And I thought, well, you're a well-covered yearling, you're a Dales pony. Let's try a moxidectin product and see if we can't, hit these redworm harder. So we gave that. And as you can see, actually the count went up rather than down. So I had the beauty and the benefit of testing her really regularly, which obviously helped. But you can see that even though we targeted the insisted stages of redworm again in the summer, we then had a high count. So it was going the wrong way. And again, this was just out with one other horse on poo-picked field. And yeah, it was high. So that's the highest result I think she's ever had, is that 1,700.
So Kristy, you've obviously wormed an awful lot over those 3 months there, but it was still going up. Like, what were you feeling seeing that count grow despite the treatment?
Well, I thought, what on earth's going on? Her immune system was obviously taking a hit. She'd just been weaned, and it's quite normal for foals to become quite stressed when they are weaned, and that weakens their immune response and will make them more prone to other conditions. So I did think that her immune response was probably playing a big part in this. but also because we were having to get to the point where we were dosing more frequently than what I as an SQP could do, I did chat to the vet to make sure that the vet was happy that we were on the right course, and that they were happy with her condition and whatnot before we progressed to giving more frequent treatments. But yeah, it was a concern, and I thought, well, what on earth are we going to worm this horse with to get rid of these redworm? So we tried the 5-day guard again, but this time, even though she had not arrived with us with resistant worms, she now had Panica resistant worms. So I think you've got a slide, Claire, that talks a bit about resistance and how that occurs.
We have, yeah, so we can just have a look. Oops. Come on, go back here. Yeah, so Wermer resistance basically is a genetic mutation that the worms go through. So they then have this ability to survive treatment. And we get there through exposure to the worming drugs. So when a wormer is licensed for treatment, it's usually around 95-98% effective. So there's always a few that are going to be resistant to that drug. When we expose those worms to the drug, it kills off all but those very few. And then those eggs are shed onto the pasture, and slowly those are perpetuated in the worming. So every time we expose the horse to a bit of wormer, then we get this effect. It actually kind of paves the way for more of these resistant worms to breed within the horse. And then we slowly get to a situation where there are more and more of them within the gut, and the worms on the pasture then are all not responsive to treatment. So horses that graze on this pasture are at very high risk of disease from these untreatable parasite infections. So, and it's really something that if we carry on worming at a regular rate, we're going to speed this process up much faster. And of course, it was the Panica 5-day, the fenbendazole, that we were seeing this resistance to in Fern, and knowing now that drug is not effective to treat the worms on that particular pasture. And that's going to happen to all the chemicals as we go forward. And if we keep using them regularly, the scientists are telling us this will be years, not decades. So that's why we really need to do something about it now and use these treatments as infrequently as possible. So we can see on Fern's program here how many wormers we had to use to help her through this period. Well, what the research is showing is that actually we want to be aiming at a place where we give no more than 2 wormers a year to each horse in order to help to slow this resistance. So yeah, Rachel says, wow, that's really quick. Definitely is really scary when we get there. And if we think that we're going to have to treat, we know that with these immature immune systems, we're going to have to treat those more frequently, then we're going to have to do less even for our adult horses to help to balance that one out. So yeah, back over to you, Kristy, and you can talk us through the rest of 2018 and how that went for you guys.
Yeah, so one of the key things to remember as well is how much we dose when we are giving these wormers, particularly to young horses, because she was growing all the time and changing very quickly. So you can imagine each time she was wormed, she actually weighed more than she did the previous time. So that's a really important thing to consider with the foals and young horses, is that we're giving them enough wormer when we do dose them. Because as far as resistance goes, like Claire just showed, we need to make sure that we're giving enough wormer to not be causing resistance. And that's one of the key things, is underdosing. So perfect solution would be to have a weigh bridge, and not everybody has access. Fern gets weighed about 3 times a year on a weigh bridge, but I do also have a weigh tape. And whilst they're not perfect for young growing horses, they certainly give you a guide and an indication. We just tend to say to add at least 10% on to what that's giving. And just be mindful with the foals and the young stock, particularly with the moxidectin. That's the only one really you want to be careful about not giving significantly more than what they do weigh. So when Fern arrived, she had an Equicell tapeworm test initially, and that was clear when she came. So she didn't come with tapeworm. But by the time we got to September 2018 and she was tested again, her tapeworm was positive that time, but so was her field companion. So we knew where that had come from. So once we found that the fenbendazole hadn't worked that second time, we changed the drug to one that we hadn't given her before, which was that double dose of pyrantel. And that was to clear that remaining medium redworm and to treat tapeworm for her as well. And thankfully, when we retested worm egg count wise, that had done the trick for those redworm. It also had worked for the tapeworm too. So that was another good thing to have monitored. And all the while, she was obviously growing, maturing, having fun in the field with her field companion, and she was getting stronger in her immune response. I did feed her things to help her immune system. And you know, whilst these things can't necessarily cure an issue, they are always going to have a positive impact, I think. So probiotics and anything that you can do to support a young horse's immune system can only be a good thing. Thank you, Fern. She's now covering the inhalage. So yeah, that was the end of 2018. And then come the winter, I always like to test before we do the routine insisted redworm treatment. And this was before there was an insisted redworm blood test that you could do. So that wasn't available at this stage, and she wouldn't have been a suitable candidate because of her high redworm burden. So we did a worm egg count and we dosed with moxidectin. And interestingly, you can see we've got on the chart there that in that December, we actually saw redworm in the droppings after that dose. And that was the first time I'd seen any evidence of worms in the droppings. Now, people often say to me, well, if I'm not seeing worms, how do I know that the worm has actually been effective? It's pretty rare to see worms, particularly if you haven't dosed. So don't be alarmed. It doesn't mean that the worm hasn't been effective. It is unusual to see them even after dosing with a high count. But we did see them on that occasion. So we decided when the next worm egg count was positive in February, we'd follow that up with a second moxidectin product. Again, had been checked with the vet because, as you can see, that was only a 2-month gap between those doses. And that's not something that we would recommend for healthy adult horses to have. But baby ones do need more treatment. And as you can see, by the time Fern was 2, she looked a bit better. She was looking more mature. She looked less wormy. Claire used to laugh at me because I could tell her before I'd even done a worm egg count by looking that Fern was going to be wormy. It was just an intuition that I had, and yeah, 9 times out of 10 I was right. But thankfully, as you can see, once we got into 2019, we actually got to the point where we were seeing some clear worm egg counts. Therefore, those doses got less frequent, and we could lengthen the gaps between the treatments that she had, whilst obviously still continuing to monitor those. But we got a really good gap there, all the way from June, when she'd had an ivermectin wormer, right the way through to November, before she needed to be wormed again. So this was showing that what we were doing was working, continued with good pasture management in terms of poo picking, to try and break that life cycle that way, because that also does help. But yeah, as you can see, we also steered away from using the Panica 5-day guard, because once those worms are resistant to a drug, unfortunately, you can't go back, is what we've found. So I don't think I've actually used it again at all with her now. I've stuck to alternating between using a moxidectin in the winter and trying to use ivermectin through the year if and when she has a positive redworm count. What I've also
she never had. Sorry to interrupt, Kristy. She never had an ascarid problem, did she? Which is what you would really go to those older style chemicals for as well.
She didn't, but if she had, we would have probably used more pyrantel than we have ivermectin. that would have been the main difference. So certainly we talk to a lot of customers who have youngsters with an ascarid issue, and it's mainly because they have used a lot of the more modern drugs. So they've used moxidectin and ivermectin, that there is documented resistance now to those, unfortunately. So you do need to know what you're trying to treat, which is why regular testing gives you that information. And obviously, if you're seeing worms in the droppings, then definitely get in touch and we can help solve what's going on and get to the bottom of the issue. Because, yeah, we've experienced it firsthand. And there's her as a 4-year-old doing some work. And then, yeah, that's a recent picture of us enjoying hacking where we are now.
Yeah, so despite these problems, she's grown into an absolute beauty, hasn't she?
She has. Yeah, she's thrived and has done well, because sometimes if they do have a redworm burden, it can really affect their gut. Thankfully, she seems to be okay. She doesn't have any long-term damage that we're aware of, or certainly not yet. So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're at the back of our redworm problem. And she just occasionally now has a low redworm count, which she has been known to deal with herself. And that is the hope, that once they are a healthy adult horse, they have a low count, and we don't treat that to try and give some immune response from the horse to deal with these burdens, rather than reaching straight for the chemical. And of course, when she does hit the magic medium, she will have a Wermer. But touch wood, so far this year, she's just had her annual moxidectin in the winter.
Fabulous. So Fern's experience is really a sign of things to come, isn't it, as we get more resistance?
Yeah, absolutely. More and more horses will have a worm problem if we don't do something about it. So every dose that we can save giving to a horse unnecessarily is absolutely going to preserve the chemicals for what we need, which is to save the horses that have a burden, and yeah, to prolong those chemicals for as long as possible, because there's still nothing new in the offing as far as we're aware anyway.
That's it. And really, if you hadn't have been doing your testing, also that it's not something that we would have been aware of, is it? You know, she's come to say, you know, we can now no longer give the chemicals and just expect that they're going to work. So it's about getting the testing in first and then doing those reduction tests afterwards. Yeah, to monitor that they've been effective. Mm-hmm. So has anyone got any questions on that, or wormer resistance, or treating young horses, anything like that? Before Fern destroys the stable.
You wouldn't think it's day number 2 of a summer field. She should be.
Never work with children or animals, that's what they say, isn't it? Okay, we've got some questions here. So with the benefit of hindsight, Kat's asking, is there anything else that we would have done or could have done to help Fern and her worm control?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'd like to think that you always learn how to do things better. Could I have done anything different? I don't know. Maybe not have used the panicker first of all, but because she was the age she was and we had no known history, I still probably would have made the same choice.
Yeah, you wouldn't know, would you, unless you'd done the treating and then the testing to see whether she had any chemical resistance there, would you?
Yeah, I think the main thing was I was glad that it was mainly one parasite that we were dealing with on an ongoing basis. And that is something of interest, because we do often find that they will have a particular parasite that they have an issue with. So we have many a horse that has, you know, clear worm egg count, one after another, but would have a positive tapeworm, for example, that persists. So that was reassuring that it was at least one parasite we were using. So I don't know that I would do anything different. I I think when it's time for Fern to have a baby herself, I'll take a similar approach. With her foal.
That's exciting. Yeah, baby ferns. Laura's asking, how long do we think it will be before there are other drugs available? Which, that's a good question, isn't it?
I don't think within 5 years at all. It might even be longer.
Yeah, I mean, most of the wins that we've had in terms of the drugs that are licensed for horses come from agriculture, because as food producing animals, there is much more money and resource behind that to be able to invest in the drugs. So, and I think the latest one that's been developed for sheep is actually toxic to horses. So it's not something that we're going to be able to utilize. I do know that there are research ongoing into different fungi and tannins for treating parasite control. They've got problems with palatability and how you package something that's kind of natural, kind of either forage based or fungal. And how do you license it, and how do you get it stable enough that can be then a dose that you can give to horses? So there is maybe some things that are online from that, but yeah, like Kristy says, I think we're years away. So we really have to use the drugs that we've got and use them very sparingly. We've got Lindsay asking, apologies, she missed the beginning, but as she's had issues from being a foal, is this issues with the mare, and can they have resistance they can pass on? Which is interesting.
Yeah, they absolutely can. And the worming of the pregnant mare is an important thing because they absolutely provide an antibody response that can be then passed on to their offspring for sure. With Fern's mum came from a sale dispersal, like a stud dispersal. So she was an older mare that had lived out all of her life, I think, and had foal after foal after foal with probably, well, I wouldn't like to say no wormer, but probably minimal worming, I would imagine, until yeah.
Oh, sorry, Kristy. Yeah, there's a genetic piece on that as well, isn't there? I know certainly for farm animals, it's one of the heritable traits that they will go to. Yeah, we have much more performance issues with horses, but yeah, that is something that they really take into consideration with farm animals. So yeah, good question. And Sally's asking, when do we advise starting worm count on foals?
Well, I think if you've got the ability and the opportunity to, the sooner the better. We did test one of our colleagues for week-old foals, and there was a surprise redworm burden at that point in time. Again, that was a mare that had a sort of trouble with redworm herself, despite her owner's best efforts. So yeah, the sooner the better. We do advise proactive dosing of foals from around about 4 weeks. But if you want a worm egg count, you absolutely can as well. So I would say from that 4-week mark. And then to do it regularly, ideally, you would love to do your foal every 4 to 6 weeks if you could. Test them that frequently, just to establish the pattern.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think, if you can do the test and treat, it will give you some really good information. And it's around sort of 6 months old that you can go into actually testing and treating a bit more as you would an adult horse. Is that right, Kristy?
Yeah, I'm getting showered in haylage.
But yeah, we've got lots of information on our website about worming youngsters and mares and foals. And if you need any specific help, then don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'll be really happy to talk to you about that and how to manage that going forward. So Lindsay saying, thanks. I suspect my journey with Super Ted is going to be similar to Fern. Just retest for egg count is coming next week, I think. So that's brilliant. Great. Well, I think it's been a really fantastic chat about the importance of worming youngsters, about resistance, and what that's, just shining a light really on the pressures that that's going to put on our horses and their health going forward. So yeah, thanks very much for joining us from your stable, Kristy. If anyone has any more questions, if you're watching this on replay, and then comment below and we'll try and get back to you on that one. You can always drop us a message on Facebook as well, and yeah, we'll be really happy to talk to you about your horse's parasite control and how we can help. But yeah, thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks, Kristy. Cheers. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Thanks everyone. Bye now.
Bye.